Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got an excellent show for you today, which includes some breaking news that we're going to get to right off the bat. This just in, Kamala Harris has apparently picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her vice president. He was seen as a dark horse candidate just some weeks ago. This small-town Midwesterner skyrocketed to the forefront, beating Governor Josh Shapiro, Andy Beshear, and others to become Harris's number two. Some close to her saying it was ultimately a vibe thing. Now, in the last few weeks, Walz has hit the ground running for auditioning for the role for Harris's Veep. Let's watch some of that.
How are you going to build a water treatment plant in a town of 400 if you don't have a collective effort at it? So I have to tell you, they scream socialism. We just build roads and we build schools and we build prosperity into this. Their whole plan is to go backwards, to give tax cuts to the wealthy. And look, it was so surprising. You know, these super successful Donald Trump, who inherited $400 million and then proceeded to fail at everything. Middle America, you earn it, but you know what? You're not on your own. Neighbors help neighbors. And I will, this one bothers me. I heard you talking about punching back at the bullies. They see people less fortunate as scapegoats and you know, punchlines for their jokes. We see them as neighbors. And I said it with my mom. My dad dies when my little brother's young. We're teenagers. We get Social Security survivor benefits. I'm all for pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. We didn't have any boots. Social Security was the boots, and we pulled ourselves up, and we paid that back. And I think J.D. Vance gets none of that. You know, it's the aw shucks, I'm from here or whatever. So my hillbilly cousins did not go to Yale, but I'll tell you what they did. They contributed to our community, and they're proud of it.
Walz continued, taking swipes at potential rival Trump's VP pick, J.D. Vance. Let's take a look at that.
That's what J.D. Vance's stick is, talking about guns. I guarantee you he can't shoot pheasants like I can. And that's a part of saying, but you know what? I guarantee I don't want weapons of war in classrooms, and there's no reason that you can't have reasonable restrictions around that without infringing on your Second Amendment. He's going in there throwing these things around that makes a difference. Democrats need to go into these places. I'm going to go in every Legion Hall I can go into and say, Vice President Harris will not cut your benefits. I sat in the VA committee for 12 years to increase those benefits with Republicans like Jeff Miller from Florida. This guy wants to cut them because it's in the 2025. We need to be bolder on that. We need to go out and say that.
And of course, Walz is known for propelling Democrats' leading insult against the GOP. It's weird.
These are weird people on the other side. They want to take books away. They want to be in your exam room. That's what it comes down to. And don't, get sugarcoating this. These are weird ideas. Listen to them speak. Listen how they talk about things. Listen to how your previous guests were right. Like you said, they've told them that they shouldn't talk about race. They can't help it. It is built into their DNA because there is no plan. There's no health care plan. There's no health care plan. There's nothing to do on this. They want to take away our alliances and leave Russia to do whatever they want. Look, they are bad on foreign policy. They are bad on the environment. They certainly have no health care plan. And they keep talking about the middle class that, as I said, a robber baron real estate guy and a venture capitalist trying to tell us they understand who we are. They don't know who we are.
And if vibes are what Harris wants, Walz is giving. Here he is with his daughter Hope at a fair in Minnesota. Watch.
Every year we as a family do something old and something new. I get to pick something, a classic, the old mill ride, to do that. And then Hope gets to pick something new.
I think we're going to go do the slingshot.
Which I don't know what it is, and they're keeping it from me. But then we're going to go get some food, corn dog.
I'm vegetarian.
Turkey then. And
turkey's meat.
Not in Minnesota, turkey's special. And we will go do some of those things and report back.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
So I like Walz. I'm very happy, Robby. This is a very good morning. And a lot of people posted the vibes. Yes, thanks, Robby. I think the vibes are there, but I also think he's someone who's good on policy and good at talking about the issues. I'm just very happy all around with this pick. As I come to all of our viewers from the Midwest, from Iowa, Walz represents a kind of culture that I think has died away, sadly, in a lot of other parts of America. There's community here. He talks about neighbors. And I remember when I was a kid, neighbors did take care of neighbors, but that quickly went away, maybe just before the recession. But I grew up on the East Coast in the tri-state area, and we didn't have the culture that's still alive and well in the Midwest. And I think even if you're not Midwestern, I think people want that for America. So as much as he has good vibes because he's a state champion football coach, he was a teacher. When he was elected to Congress, he quickly became the president of the freshman class. He's a guy that people like, but he also has a track record of delivering on policy as governor. And I think that made him a really good pick.
Well, we're all three of us Midwesterners. Obviously, I grew up in Michigan, and so I can identify with the vibe, even as I have some quibbles with his choice. I mean, I understand from your perspective, yes, I agree. He's an excellent choice. He is clearly a more progressive leaning person on really on every issue. I think he's probably arguably more committedly progressive than Kamala Harris is. So I'm sure the left is happy with this choice. I think politically speaking, it doesn't make the most sense to me, doesn't make as much sense to me as picking Josh Shapiro, being that Josh Shapiro is the governor of the must-win state for Kamala, and he's very popular there. With moderates and Republicans and everyone else. If he improved even slightly her chances of winning that state, I know you think that Tim Walz will be well received by the people in Pennsylvania as well, and that very well might be the case, but it's just that it's their governor and it's the must-win state. But, I think in some ways this might be actually Kamala doing something a little bit similar to Hillary in 2016, and we know how that turned out, is picking, a folksy guy, a likable guy, but not a guy who's gonna, who brings so much star power himself that he's going to overshadow her. Hillary Clinton picked Tim Kaine, senator from Virginia, a name is not really one we commonly hear from. Again, not someone who is gonna clash with her in any way, was not a massive plus or a minus, was just a guy on the ticket with her, was not going to overshine her. Tim Walz I also seems folksy, relatable, speaks well on TV, will perform well in a debate, will do well on a campaign trail. I'm not at all knocking his performance as a political figure or a talking head. I think he's got that down. I think he'll rep the ticket well. So I think it's hardly a bad choice from that direction. However, it does, I think, will suggest maybe to a lot of the Republican, never Trump, moderate, centrist people who are maybe looking at the Harris ticket and saying, could I get on board? Is this the guy that brings them on board? This guy who's even more to the left on energy and environmental issues and a lot of economic issues than she is. Is that really going to be the right sell? I don't know.
I think it will be, because I think a lot of Kamala's positions there seem like coastal elitism to me. It seems like more establishment Democrat politics to satisfy the corporate donors of the party. Tim Walz has never been that guy. And Rahm Emanuel and the Democratic establishment really didn't like him when he was running for his House seat. But the way he talks about delivering on policy for the working class is not in terms of being far left or being progressive. As he puts it, they scream socialism. We just build roads and we build schools. And that's something that's actually proven to win in a very Republican district when he first ran in 2002 and 2004 in Minnesota. So that's a district that Trump won in 2020, 53.8% to 43.7%. That's also a district that Walz won 49.5% for him and 47.17% against him. So he's proven to win. When he first ran in Minnesota 1, this was a district that was favored for Republicans in prior elections by 7 points. And then he won in this district that's 60% Republican, 35% Democrats in terms of voter registration, according to the Minnesota Secretary of State website. So he's putting up good numbers. He had to get Republicans to vote for him to win that vote share. So I think that is really huge, that he's someone who's proven to win in a very conservative district and win with a margin that required getting conservatives to turn out. In that sense, I think he's safer than Shapiro, who's only served one term as governor and hasn't really proven to win in handedly Republican districts. So I think
well, I mean, Shapiro won in the whole state, right? I mean, he won, instead of winning one district that his, demographics and political makeup has changed dramatically in 20 years, Shapiro won the entire state, and it's the state. Kamala doesn't need to just win Walz's district. She needs to, she's going to win the state of Minnesota, probably, in all likelihood, but she needs to win the state of Pennsylvania. So I think that's the comparison, is to the whole state.
Yeah, and I think Walz is someone who can win in Pennsylvania, given that he's popular enough to become the president of his freshman class. He's also got a military background. When he retired from the National Guard after 24 years of service. And when he retired, he was at the rank of Command Sergeant Major. So he's the highest ranking enlisted man to ever serve in the U.S. Congress. This is a guy who can really make the case to a lot of working Americans who like the vibe of someone who's a state football champion and a teacher, but also someone who talks about political issues as if they're common sense. Yeah. And I think that is someone who can campaign in Pennsylvania and win people over. But I'm not confident Josh Shapiro would have been able to campaign in the Midwest and win people over in the way that Tim Walz has proven to. And so whatever it came down to, whether it's that Shapiro served in the IDF, that progressives like Walz and young people like Walz, and you need those people for manpower to win an election, whether it's on social media or walking the streets and knocking doors, that's a really important group to have behind you. Whatever it was, I think the country's better for this decision, because Shapiro's been governor for a year. We don't really know what he's capable of. He's gotten some good things done in the short span that he's been governor, but I think Tim Walz proving to provide free lunch for kids at schools, proven to invest in infrastructure, and proven to win handedly and have a trifecta in Minnesota in a way that hasn't pissed off Republicans in a state. And a lot of Republicans are happy with the programs he's put forward. I think that's someone that can win in Pennsylvania and a lot of other states like Georgia and maybe even North Carolina.
Well, we're going to continue talking about this. A lot more to get into. Going to get some reactions from political folks about the pick. Stay tuned. More Rising in just a minute. Vice President Kamala Harris has picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate. Reacting online, many on the right feeling energized, calling out Walz for his progressive policies. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis tweeted, quote, Harris Walz, most left-wing ticket in American history. Minnesota was ground zero for the BLM riots of 2020. Harris egged it on, and Walz sat by and let Minneapolis burn. The Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro similarly said, quote, picking Walz is a massive gift to the Republicans. He's a radical leftist from a non-swing state with a long history of insane statements who presided over the burning down of his state in 2020. Kamala picked him because he's not a Jew and she's too online. Meghan McCain wrote, quote, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more extreme progressive running mate. He is a Trojan horse with a red state accent. Fox News columnist David Marcus said, quote, every Republican I know is thrilled at the selection of Walz. Shapiro was going to be a problem. Now, not only is it not him, but Harris publicly humiliated him. Perfect.
But many on the left are applauding Harris's pick. Take a listen to Representative Nancy Pelosi reacting to the news on Morning Joe.
Tim Walz is wonderful, and she had many good choices among the six and certainly among the two. I'm a big fan of Governor Shapiro. Tim Walz, I know very well. He served in the House. To characterize him as left is so unreal. It's just not what the question. He's right down the middle. He's a Heartland of America Democrat. And he was the chair of our Veterans Affairs Committee. And I don't want anybody to forget that, because he made tremendous, tremendous gains for our veterans. Working with our folks on the Appropriations Committee and with the Speaker, we made more progress than had ever been made in the history of our country since the GI Bill under his leadership. 25 years in the National Guard, longest serving non-commissioned officer ever served in the Congress of the United States. So he brings the security credential, he brings the rural credential, and he will do well in Moral America.
So the official account, White Dudes for Harris, tweeted, quote, he's an amazing leader who delivered a powerful speech last week, highlighting the importance of protecting fertility treatments like IVF and rejecting Project 2025. Also, I will say on the front of families, which has become a real point of contention in this race, especially between the vice presidential pick for Trump, J.D. Vance. Walz is very popular in his state for his policy around protecting paid family leave. And I don't know if these attacks are really landing. Shapiro doesn't have as much experience as Tim Walz. To say that he's Jewish and that's why he's not selected is such a stretch of why he wasn't selected. Shapiro served in a foreign military. Yes, it was Israel's, but that doesn't have to do with him being Jewish. That has to do with a question around, will someone want someone who served in a foreign military at the highest office when many Americans are not happy with military spending right now? And this attack that Walz let Minnesota burn in 2020. He called in the National Guard. He served in the National Guard for 24 years. He made that decision at a time when many governors and mayors were not asking for outside help. And he was the guy to say, we need to bring peace to the state. We're going to bring in the National Guard to make sure everyone's safe. So people are scared of his policies. Why? I don't think everyday people are. I think right-wing commentators are, because they've been running on the government's horrible, and people tend to agree because the government hasn't been delivering on public programs. Tim Walz is an example of, what if they actually did and didn't cut those public programs to let the private companies that lobby a lot of the right wing in America to cut the public programs so they can come in and profit off of something that used to be guaranteed. And we've seen the crumbling of a lot of our infrastructure, our water, our roads, our schools, when private companies come in and do the bare minimum to make as much money as possible. So I think that's where they're coming from with that. They're scared of someone who actually delivers on public programs in a world where they want things that should be publicly provided to be something or private companies profit off of. So I just don't see this working.
I mean, you're right. The conservative view is 100% exactly in the opposite direction from what you just outlined. The progressive view. The conservative view is that the government does not successfully build things. The more the government spends on things, the worse it gets. See every sector of our economy getting more spending from government over the last 30 or even 50 years, getting worse. Everything from education to healthcare and housing, the most aggressively subsidized in government managed programs, aspects of your life. Everything the government touches gets worse and worse and worse. Everything that's mostly left to private sectors, tech, innovation, all of that gets cheaper. We're able to possess more goods, more in the tech sector specifically. What you're able to purchase on those categories gets better because of private innovation. Everything the government touches and runs gets more expensive and worse. And while it sounds great, obviously we need to fix our roads, we need to fix our bridges, we need to do all of that. What's stopping it? It's private contractors, not government employees who end up fixing those things. It's businesses, and they do it. Yes, they do it to make a profit, and there has to be the profit incentive is to build things and to provide things that people want. And the government has a role to play in setting regulations and to also providing some funding for things that we think ought to be paid for collectively. That doesn't mean they have to provide and administer it, and I would argue that they don't do a good job providing and administering it. And some of the regulations, many of them coming from progressive Democrats, have made it impossible to do anything in this country, to build anything. The delay in getting roads and bridges fixed, so you have to do an environmental impact project of any time you want to, re-landscape your house. You gotta call in, you gotta get some red tape procedure signed off on, and that is what's killing this country. And it's the ideology of big government liberals, of one in which Walz is quite proud of. I think we'll have to do more to look specifically at how he handled the 2020 BLM riots. You say he sent in the National Guard. I know conservatives are really knocking him on that. I think there's going to be a lot to knock him on COVID as well. I took a brief look at that a couple days ago when I wrote about the VP options. I'm going to do a deeper dive on that later this week. But you say Shapiro wasn't passed over because he's Jewish, and okay, maybe that's the case, but it it certainly. It seems like the opposition to him from a lot of progressive leftists was, it's more than just that he's Jewish. It's that the perception that he is more pro-Israel than the other options, although I'm not sure his actual policy. He's been very critical of Netanyahu. Shapiro has. He's said that Israel can defend itself, which is something Walz has said, which is something Harris. I mean, Harris is part of the Biden administration, right? Which the left calls Genocide Joe. Are any of these people really all that distinct in their desire to continue supporting Israel and funding Israel, frankly, which is not even something I want to do? I don't know. That's what's given rise to the idea that it was the Jewishness, because I don't know that his views are going to be all that much a departure from Walz's or Harris's on foreign policy, at least.
Well, Harris's husband is Jewish, so I think the idea that she wouldn't want a running mate just because he's Jewish is ridiculous. I think people are assessing.
Well, would it be too many Jewish people in the prominent positions? Is what conservatives say the left had decided.
I mean, no one on the left has said that. Only people on the right has said that. And I think that's telling. So I think people are looking at policy decisions and they're asking, does this make my life better? Does Trump's tax cuts to corporations make their life better? Because people have been told that trickle-down economics, making the environment in the country better for big business, will make their lives better. And I think it's been too long, since the 1970s, when that idea was a dream. We haven't seen it work. Working class people have less purchasing power of their dollars than they did in 2009. They're 27% less and 40% less since 1968 if we assess minimum wage over time and the purchasing power of someone earning minimum wage in the United States. But we've seen corporate profits increase exponentially, in part to Trump's tax cuts. So yes, people don't like big government and government spending and adding dollars to the deficit if that means they're not getting anything in return. If it means it's not growing the economy in a way where working people, everyday people, benefit. Having corporations with profit margins that are 40% is ridiculous. And I think people would rather see corporations pay their fair share in taxes and that money go to things like building schools, like paid family leave programs, like making sure Social Security is solvent and people have a good retirement when they've worked their whole lives. So this attack that it's all big government, when Walz has demonstrated kind of the antidote to this idea that we give a bunch of money to the richest people in the country and we ensure that what we have is the privatization of a lot of our industry and working people suffer. Instead, he's decided to directly invest in public programs like feeding kids, like building roads. And yes, in the Midwest, environmental policy is actually popular in red areas because they make their living on farming. And climate change has been a disaster for a lot of farmers when it comes to drought and flooding. So policies like that, you'd be surprised, are actually popular in the Midwest. I think what they're looking for is someone like Walz who does that without also being one of the typical liberal elites, which Walz is not. So I think that's why Republicans are reacting so harshly. I think they're just scared.
I think they're elated. I think they see this as a big opportunity. I think he doesn't sound like a liberal elite. I agree with you on that. But I hope he runs very much on his true beliefs, which are, yes, confiscating massive amounts of wealth from the productive parts of the economy, redistributing them and shutting them down to ever grow the federal government in some vain or naive hope of serving people more and better services, which the government is never, ever able to do. I hope that is front and center as they
seek. Say those things, Robby.
What's that? Well, that's what you're saying. You're saying those are his policies. He said he's proud to be a big liberal, that socialism is just neighborliness. He self-identifies that way. You're aptly describing. I agree with you in your characterization of him that he wants a massive is a tax and spend liberal who wants a massive expansion of government authority to take money from the productive parts of our economy.
I think, people watching the program will hear that what I just said is not what you just said. On the socialism front, that's a misquote. He said they can scream socialism, but we just build roads and schools. He never advocated for socialism. He never advocated for big government or big public spending in that way. Trump's added $8.8 trillion to the deficit. So drawing that line doesn't make much sense. And you're saying a bunch of things that Tim Walz has never said himself. So I think that just speaks to the right being a little bit afraid of this guy.
They are, they were afraid of Josh Shapiro. They're happy to have Tim Walz join the ticket, as am I.
I just think the criticism should be things people actually said.
He has actually said that. You're describing his positions accurately. You just think they're good things. His position is that massively increasing taxes, massively taking money from from corporations. That's going to make our economy better. Would make it raise the cost of doing business, raise the cost of all the things we buy, the food we eat. That's going to be good for working people in this country. Yes, that is the Harris-Walz pitch to Americans. We'll see how they like it, if it resonates with them. We'll have more Rising right after this.
Former President Trump's team hasn't wasted much time on attacking the vice presidential pick for Kamala Harris, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. It seems the messaging they're going with is he's a radical far-left progressive. Trump's campaign, in a statement, reacted to the news, writing, quote, "From proposing his own carbon-free agenda to suggesting stricter emission standards for gas-powered cars and embracing policies to allow convicted felons to vote, Walz is obsessed with spreading California's dangerously liberal agenda far and wide. If Walz won't tell voters the truth, we will. Just like Kamala Harris, Tim Walz is a dangerously liberal extremist, and the Harris-Walz California dream is every American's nightmare." And the Trump campaign is already working on fundraising off of the news, writing, quote, "Tim Walz will unleash hell on earth. He's already pulling in millions to wipe MAGA out." So I just don't see this attack line working, simply because I think that's not a fair categorization. He himself says, okay, you guys can scream socialism, we just build roads and schools. He delivers on policy. So Trump's going to have to get specific about what he's talking about, because Walz has very frankly, and these videos have gone viral, discussed his positions, what he's gotten done in Minnesota. He's popular in a very conservative part of the country. So to frame this as something that's Californian when it's Midwestern, I just don't think it's going to stick. I think there's very few people that take Trump seriously when he calls someone a far left radical. We had, Joe Biden in office giving a ton of money to Israel, not delivering on progressive policies that he promised when he ran. It's very obvious he was a more establishment member of the party, and he was getting called a far left communist. So I don't think this attack line is going to work much longer for Trump. I don't see it sticking with Walz because he's already really good at arguing against it.
Well, you say more conservative part of the country, but Minnesota is a blue state. He's someone who said he's happy to be self-identified as a big government liberal. He supports much stricter emissions standards. He has a plan to get to absolute carbon neutrality by 2030. He's even more vigorously in support of green energy efficiency mandates than Kamala Harris is. He's far left on immigration compared to where the current mood of the country is. He's left on gun control, healthcare. He's right. He said friendly things about socialism, that socialism is just neighborliness. I know these are not controversial statements or policy positions for people on the left, but I think they're going to be alienating to the extent that conservatives are able to publicize what he absolutely thinks. He say building schools and building houses and building roads. Well, how are we going to build those things with even more and more federal mandates for which energy sources you can use to build these things, or getting the federal government more involved in arbitrating these disputes or regulating the land? That's exactly what stops us from building things. So I'd be happy to hear him renounce all of that and say, oh no, I'm actually a market liberal centrist type person who wants to make it easier to do work in this country and build things. I'd love to hear that from him. But, he has, or look at his education record. I mean, he's as friendly with teachers unions as anyone in the Democratic Party could possibly be. Teachers unions who contributed to the keeping our schools closed for as long as possible, the most locked down sector of our society, the one that was educating young children who were themselves safest of all demographics from COVID. His COVID record, by the way, is awful. I plan to get into that in greater detail, perhaps in a radar tomorrow. But look, I think Republicans will certainly raise all of these things, whether it ultimately matters, whether that's how he ends up being perceived. He's not, his personal performance of being a politician doesn't seem radical. He seems like, a nice older man. Actually, he seems older than he actually is. He's only 60. I think people were saying he kind of looks older than he is. But he has an energy about him and a way with words. So I don't know. Maybe the perception of him that Republicans are going to try won't stick. But if they talk about the things he actually believes in, they'll find that it's extremely to the left.
Yeah, I think Americans like teachers. Teachers take care of our kids. They teach our kids. Paying teachers well is a popular policy. That's something that Harris initially ran on. I think his support from teachers unions doesn't mean he owns every political decision of teachers unions, just like Trump's campaign doesn't own every political position of the groups that endorse him. But I think his policies during COVID, when families were struggling to put food on the table, he ensured that families were fed at schools. And he didn't say this is just if you're in a certain income bracket and there's some kind of stigmatization in the lunchroom, where I grew up in a lunchroom where it was very obvious who was on free and reduced lunch and who wasn't. He decided if middle-class families want to take advantage of this, they can. And actually, this was a policy that during COVID, when families came home, they wanted to spend time with their kids. So instead of preparing lunches and breakfast, they had quality family time. And it was middle-income families that ended up using this program the most for pennies on their taxes. So that's popular. People are questioning big government because big government has taken tax dollars and not given them anything in return. Tim Walz is someone who recognized that people like public programs. What they don't like is when the government raises the deficit and has a lot of public spending that regular working families and middle-class Americans never end up seeing. That's what we had under Trump. He added $8.8 trillion to the deficit, and a large proportion of the money he added to the deficit was tax cuts for corporations whose profits went up by $1 trillion in the last 4 years. Tim Walz got his infrastructure spending done. He got his programs around free and reduced lunch done, public safety spending and other infrastructure through bond issuance, through capital investment, through highway cash and general fund cash. This is someone who delivers for people. And so as much as you say, oh, we should be afraid of big government, this really is the government just working for the people. And it's turned out to be extremely popular in Minnesota. So I think if Trump wants to run against all of those things and say that they're bad, I don't think it's going to go well for him.
Well, we shall find out. Kamala Harris has now made it official. Previously, these were just kind of news reports on his candidacy, but she has written on Twitter, "I'm proud to announce that I've asked Tim Walz to be my running mate as a governor, a coach, a teacher, and a veteran. He's delivered for working families like his. It's great to have him on the team. Now let's get to work. Join us." So it is official that he will be the VP pick. Tim Walz, two-term governor of Minnesota and a member of Congress before that. And we're continuing to look at reactions to this and see how it all plays out. I just saw Nate Silver, the pollster, came out with a piece saying that he thinks it's a fine choice, although, as I've said, and my opinion on this is mostly based on what Nate Silver had to say, is that he still thinks Josh Shapiro would have been a better choice. Again, not in terms of governance, but just in terms of how it affects the ability to win Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania being a much, much more likely tipping state, the most likely tipping state for Harris if she wins it, than Minnesota, which she is expected to win. If Minnesota is truly competitive, in that Donald Trump could win it, that means she's going to be having problems elsewhere in the Midwest, in all likelihood. We will have more reactions from political figures on the Tim Walz pick coming up next. Stay tuned for more Rising. In a major blow to big tech, a federal judge ruled Monday that Google has spent billions to create a monopoly over search and advertising in violation of antitrust law. The U.S. District Court judge wrote, quote, "After having carefully considered and weighed the witness testimony and evidence, the court reaches the following conclusion. Google is a monopolist and it has acted as one to maintain its monopoly." This is the first big win for federal authorities going after big tech's massive market power. Second trial will determine potential fixes, which could include breaking up Google parent company, Alphabet. That process, though, will likely be lengthy.
The judge found Google maintained a monopoly through exclusive agreements with partners like Apple that ensure it's the default search engine on their devices. Google controls about 90% of the online search market. In 2021, Google paid $26 billion to ensure its search engine was the default on smartphones and browsers. The judge found this restricts Google's rivals from accessing the skill needed to effectively compete with the search giant. The decision sent Alphabet stocks tumbling 4% on Monday. In a statement, a Google spokesperson said, quote, "This decision recognizes that Google offers the best search engine, but concludes that we shouldn't be allowed to make it easily available." Alphabet plans to appeal the decision.
Reacting online, Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar tweeted, quote, "For years, Google has used its dominance in online search markets to undermine rivals and limit competition. This is a huge victory for the American people and shows the importance of enforcing our antitrust laws, why I am advocating for competition rules of the road for monopoly tech companies." Similarly, the White House called the ruling a, quote, "victory for the American people." And Karine Jean-Pierre said that Biden and Harris have long believed Americans deserve an internet that is free, fair, and open for competition. Attorney General Merrick Garland said, quote, "No company, no matter how large or influential, is above the law. The Justice Department will continue to vigorously enforce our antitrust laws." All right, here's the problem I have with this decision, though. And, I have no love for big tech. We've had a lot of criticism of various tech policies on this show. I think we've been very social media and tech focused for a number of years as a show that exists on YouTube, on the web. But here's the problem I have. So they're saying that Google is a monopoly because the Google search engine is the default engine on smartphones, and they pay Apple in order to be the default search engine. Well, I mean, they're the default search engine because they're the one everybody wants to use, right? What if they had no agreement with Apple? They were not paying Apple. I mean, that could be the thing as a result of this decision. And the Google was no longer the default search engine on your iPhone. What would happen? Every customer, every person who buys an iPhone would be irritated and would look for the swiftest way to download Google, to add it as an app onto their iPhone so that it would be. I mean, that whenever you're served something that for whatever reason doesn't give you Google as the default search engine, you are, the vast majority of people, 99% of people, are annoyed and want to and see how they can navigate to the Google search engine the quickest. So given that, right, the justification ostensibly for antitrust and all that is to protect the consumers, but the consumers have spoken with a pretty universal desire to have Google as the search engine. So the government is saying they can't do that despite the clear and expressed wishes of the consumers. I think that doesn't ultimately make any sense. That's my contrarian take, I guess.
Well, if Google is so popular and 99% of people are annoyed when their search engine is not Google, I don't know where you got that number from. I'm not sure that that's true. I know a lot of people who are very afraid of big corporations collecting our data. They don't like that there's back-end access to everything they've ever searched, and they value their privacy, and they choose not to use Google. And Google paying for smartphones to auto-log Google as their default and making it near impossible to change that is something that people don't like. People like free choice. People want to open their browser and use a search engine that they can just simply click to as their favorite search engine and put it in their settings of their phone when they get it set up and they download their contacts. It's something you would only have to do once and do it again if you want to switch it. Google instead paid to be the company that everyone uses. And that's a little bit unfair as a $1.7 trillion company. How do you compete with that as the little guy? You can't pay Apple more money to prefer your search engine instead. So I think this is a good ruling. And I think people in a time of being afraid of their data being used against them and being taken by people who never asked for it and shouldn't have it, I think people are likely going to opt for search engines with maybe better privacy, maybe better options, maybe a different algorithm. So this is an antitrust decision that I think is long overdue. I covered it for More Perfect Union back in September when it wasn't really in the news yet. And this really was the main thing in the lawsuit, I will say, is having Google pay to be the default in smartphones and making it near impossible to change. So it seems like they argued the case and that it was a strong case. It all seems good for me in terms of, moving towards a world where people are using the search engine they want to use when their data is being taken by everybody.
I mean, I'm always struck by the fact that the #1 search term on Bing, a major other search engine, is Google. Because people are on Bing and going, wait a minute, I want Google, and trying to get there. Yes, there are some privacy-conscious people. That choice is a good thing, obviously. There are some people who want to use one of the DuckDuckGo or something like that. That's all fine. I'm all for that. Those choices should be available. They are available. But most people, Google is their default, and it's not that way because it's been construed against the other. It's because it's what people want. It is the clear expressed desire of people. So to have the government come in and say, you can't have the thing, people can't have the thing they clearly want because our feelings are hurt, it's unfair to some inferior product. This is exactly the kind of picking winners and losers in the market that most people find so obnoxious. This is what Amy Klobuchar's judgment, that would be better if 25% of people used Bing instead of Google. Like, who are you, lady? People want to use this product, and the government is getting in their way. I stipulate this is exactly what people hate about big government progressivism. This is nanny state people trying to say that in our judgment for what kind of internet service products you should use is better than your own, which I think is just obviously not true and is not how people think. Yes, the other choices should be available. They are available, but the vast majority of people, I mean, these are popular companies with popular products, far more popular than our political institutions, far more popular than Congress. And Congress is going to come in, Congress and judges are going to come in and just make the product worse because it's unfair to the competitors. By the way, there's nothing philosophically in the law, antitrust law, that's like you have to be fair to your competitors. No, it has to be fair to the consumer. The standard is this good for the consumer, not is this good for some rival product. You obviously don't have to run a business in a way to make things like nice for your competitors. You're trying to beat your competitors. The whole law is based on the idea that, right, if there's a monopoly, then they can raise the prices, and that will be bad for the consumers. But here there's no demonstrated harm to the consumer because the consumer prefers this product, and you can get the other products. So we'll see it in real time. If Apple is forbidden, or Google is forbidden from paying Apple to be the default search engine, this is actually just going to screw Apple because they're going to have to make Google the default search engine anyway because that's what everybody wants. They just won't get any money from Google over it. So maybe that's a fine outcome, I guess, if you really just feel like Google should lose $20 billion. But that's what people are going to demand, that because they're going to be on Bing instead saying, where's Google? That's what they do. That's their expressed preference.
Yeah, I would say Google, being such a monopoly that they control 90% of the market, that they're able to just pay to be the default, that's not competing with the other search engines that are out there. That's paying for your competition to go away. That's not good business. That's not providing something of more value to society so you have more consumers. That's rigging the game against the little guy. And a lot of people across America are sick of this same corporate chains being in every single town. They're sick of seeing small businesses not thriving and being pushed out by huge corporations. And that's happened in part of big government and big corporations being on the same team. And that's exactly the quote that I always throw to. Mussolini described fascism as. He said it would more accurately be called corporatism, and it's the merging together of the corporation and the state. When corporations are so big that they can pay politicians to favor them and be on the same team as them and give them a ton of lobbying money to not break them up and not regulate them, that's what people are afraid of. People don't want an authoritarian society where corporations are so big, they get to filter out what we search for. Do you think Google's giving search results that are favorable to big corporations and the elites in the country? Or do you think they're using their power for a favorable news output when you're trying to search on their website? That's why it's really interesting you bring up the Bing thing, Robby, because when I was covering this back in September, I was using my iPhone, so it was defaulting to Google, and I wasn't getting news on this at all when I was trying to find it and explicitly searching for it. And I had to go to DuckDuckGo, and I had to go to Bing to get news that was critical of Google. And I think people don't want to live in an economy where the government decides that there's going to be no competition. We're just going to let the biggest companies control their industry. People don't want that. People like competition. People like products getting better because they have to compete for consumers to use them. And I think this is going to be something that it's really revealing for who is against this, because that really goes to show who likes big corporations and who likes authoritarianism. You can call it big government, but really what this is the government enforcing market competition, which is not what they've been doing. They've turned down a lot of decisions in the antitrust division of the DOJ where they could have broken up companies, and they've waited a very long time. Ticketmaster and Google are overdue for this kind of regulation.
I could not disagree more strongly. Market competition is exactly what happens. Is the market determining that this is the best product, this is the one that won out on the market, and this is the one people want to use. What we're now going to get is the opposite of competition, which is the government deciding this product is too well liked, and we're going to stop the financial transaction between private companies to have it be the default search engine, so that to benefit a rival company. I mean, Bing is owned by Microsoft, another major corporation. This is just a decision to benefit them. This is just the government saying we're going to give them something favorable now. I mean, I'm sure they have lobby. This is where the whole corporatism thing, which I'm totally against, by the way. I agree with you that's what fascism is and that it's very bad. But like, this isn't a blow to corporations. This is a blow to a specific firm to benefit a rival firm that I'm sure is lobbying the very same people. You know, I don't want these outcomes decided by who is the most connected in Washington, by who can best rig the legislature or best leverage the people who make the regulations to benefit them. I want to let the market decide. And on this matter, the market decided pretty clearly. If these other search engines were offering a vastly better product, I mean, there's so much creative destruction in the tech sector. What is the most preferred search engine has changed dramatically over time. What are the most visited websites has changed dramatically over time, because the market here is so dynamic and it's so impermanent and something new comes along. And, I obviously think some rules of the road have to be enforced, but the monopolies in the tech sector, I mean, there's this constant disruption occurring, and it's market driven. It's because people move on to a different product. So to hear for the government to say, no, we're deciding something that everybody likes, most people like, is it has to take a blow so some other corporation can maybe get a shot, a corporation that people mostly use the product in order to find the product we're now punishing. It just seems so misguided to me. But I also expect this decision to be reversed at some higher court. But we'll have to leave it there. Tell us what you think about this decision. This is a lively debate. Let us know in the comments. We'll have more Rising right after this.
Progressive Congresswoman Cori Bush finds herself in a contentious primary election today against AIPAC-backed candidate Wesley Bell. Bush has been outspoken about her views on the Israel-Hamas war. She has declined to call Hamas a terrorist group and has repeatedly called for a lasting ceasefire and an end to Israel's, quote, genocidal acts. Here she was in April.
We are here to urge the United States government to work to de-escalate the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. We are saying no to war. Stop the bloodshed, stop the violence, stop the trauma. Just stop.
Prosecutor Wesley Bell's campaign has been financed by the pro-Israel lobby, and the groups have poured more than $8 million into attack ads against Bush. It's Bush's unapologetic views on Israel and Gaza that led to Bell driving such a competitive campaign against her. Yet the case he's bringing against Bush has little to do with Israel, and he's arguing that she prioritizes her squad fame in Congress over local issues. So we shall see how that goes. According to the polls, she's down, and I think expected to lose, although it would not be a total shock if she holds on. She's up against some powerful moneyed interest, obviously, with AIPAC spending a lot of money against her. It appears to be making a difference, no?
Yeah, it always does. I mean, whenever you have an election where one side can afford to reach voters with information, attack ads at a level that the other candidate can't, if you don't pay much attention to politics and all you see is attack ads and attack ads and attack ads against Cori Bush, you might get into the voting booth and have some negative feelings about Cori Bush. And so, yeah, of course, this amount of money can influence an election in the favor of, the AIPAC-backed candidate, which I will say, if this was any other foreign government that was spending this amount of money in U.S. elections, if there was a group that said, Americans for China PAC, and anytime someone criticized China, their labor policies, U.S.-based companies in China, they bankrolled a candidate to unseat them, I think we would be questioning that in a very different way. Same thing if it was Russia, but because it's Israel, it's not criticized in that way in mainstream media. It's not criticized that way by establishment Democrats or Republicans. But that's really how I see it, and I think that's how a lot of the American people are starting to see it. I don't think we should have these kind of foreign interest groups representing the interests of one country be operating in the United States.
And I do think she has not done herself any favors by saying some kooky things over the years. It recently was recalled to public attention in an interview she did about her book. And in her book, she claimed to have magically healed a woman with cancer tumors by touching her and making them go away. She claimed to cure a sick child by touching him. She claimed to have cured someone's COVID. She's, has said she worked as a faith healer. That's the kind of stuff that gets, when you have a very wealthy, well-connected opponent, who's running with a lot of financial support, including from AIPAC, is able to highlight those damaging things. But some of this stuff that appears in attack ads, it's not made up, it's true stuff. It's stuff she did and said that people find a little weird and uncomfortable.
Yeah, maybe those people are not familiar with Cori Bush simply because she doesn't have the money to run attack ads against the attack ads in the way that the AIPAC bankrolled candidate does. But if she did, she would probably be telling people about her time as a nurse, and that was her role in helping people heal from various illnesses. I think it's ridiculous that they're taking clips
by
of
magically touching them.
I think that many people who are in the faith community do believe that praying for people and do believe that healing energy matters when someone is receiving medical care and going through sickness. And I think to take those words and say, she must be the worst, she's so crazy, is to neglect that actually a lot of people in America can relate to that. She didn't say she prayed for them. She said she touched them and the tumors disappeared after she laid her hands on this person. That's, are those her exact
I think
words,
that's a more
Robby?
magical.
You're positive?
What?
Those are her exact words? Yes,
those are her. That's what she wrote in her book and what she reiterated in an interview. She said that a homeless lady came up to her and she had tumors and she wanted us to feel them. And I put my hand on her, my hands just began to move and the lumps were no longer there. She said that. So it's...
I think... Yeah, I think it's
that's
ridiculous.
From the forum, A Story of Pain and Perseverance in America, her autobiography.
Yeah, I think Cori Bush being a faith leader and Cori Bush being someone who served as a nurse, her talking about this is not far off from what a lot of people in America believe happens when someone gets sick and how they heal. A lot of people believe that energy is important, beliefs are important, positivity is important. And to take her words there and say, she must be the absolute worst, she should not serve in Congress, is ridiculous. Because Cori Bush is someone who was sleeping outside of the Capitol. When people were homeless during COVID and people were struggling and losing their jobs, she was one of the key figures that brought enough public attention to the issue that got people real stimulus in the time of COVID and got real policies passed to address people experiencing homelessness. And she's someone who can represent those people very well as someone who was homeless herself. And so if you want to hate on Cori Bush, saying you hate her because she cares about people and tried to heal strangers is just a wild attack. Explain why, if you're someone who's bankrolling a candidate from the position of AIPAC, the people of St. Louis, Missouri should pick their representative based on how much they support Israel or not, and why they should give up their candidate who's been delivering on policies that actually affect working people in Missouri.
She was also, I should note, investigated by the Department of Justice for spending lavishly on personal security, including to a security guard that she later married, that they had a relationship with. She cooperated with the investigation, and I believe nothing ever specifically came of it, although I think she was knocked for spending so much money on personal security. At the same time, she was perceived to have a kind of abolish the police or defund the police kind of attitude that, well, that's all good for people who need protection in their private, in our cities, but for herself, she has her own private police force that she eventually married to protect her.
She has a security team, Robby. She's a member of Congress who's experienced threats to her life. And if we know anything, it's people who stand up to power in the United States, like the Boeing whistleblowers, are not the safest people in the country. I don't think many people are going to think her spending money on security is going to be the main thing that is why she can't.
I don't have any problem with her spending money on security. They're going to point out the hypocrisy of her not wanting everyday people to have the security. You say public service so important. People love having public services provided. Well, the one that even I think the government ought to provide, the reason the government exists actually is to provide us public safety, is to provide police services. That's government's quintessential function, is to provide police services, and that it was not fashionable for a time in the progressive left to want that fully invested in, and she was very much in that milieu. So I don't know, but I do think she's going to lose. I don't know about you. It looks not so good for her.
Yeah, we'll see what the people decide, but I think that her positions on public safety are pretty in line with what a lot of people say when you talk to them. People don't like the police. They don't like being pulled over. They don't like the police being around. They make people nervous, and people want to move in the direction of public safety, being people in the community who care about the community. And yes, we would still have maybe officers investigating crimes, ensuring public safety, ensuring that there's less crime, but addressing crime at its root source. There can be, people in the role of public safety and the same amount of public spending, but people are not seeing that the way the police's mandates are today, that they have a duty to prevent crimes. That's something that the Supreme Court has ruled. And I think people want something a little bit different. They want to feel safe. They want personnel to help with that. But there's a question around whether the modern police as it exists today is best equipped to do that legally and in terms of what they're mandated to do at the local level. So I think, Cori Bush's position on the police is not something that makes her a hypocrite because she has personal security. The defund the police movement was about reinvesting that in public safety that was preventing crimes and actually investigating crimes when they do happen in a meaningful way. We've seen the police get increasingly more money, but not resolve more crimes. And I think in a time of mass protests in the United States, people don't want it to be a fight among riot police and protesters. They want a way for people to freely express their views in a way that keeps communities safe, not resulting in police paying huge sums of money in lawsuits because they've used excessive force. The police, as they exist today and operate, are essentially defunding themselves with the millions of dollars they pay in lawsuits because of how they respond to, protests in the street. So I don't think that's going to cost Cori Bush this election. I think it will be determined by the attack ads that AIPAC paid for if she loses.
We'll be back with more Rising right after this.
Some are calling this week's stock market crash the Kamala crash. The Dow tumbled more than 1,000 points yesterday. The Nasdaq fell 6.2% after the market opened, and the S&P fell 4.2%.
Others are saying if you care about your paycheck, Trump is your guy. Here's author Jim Cramer on that.
If you're in the stock market, if you care about your paycheck, you go with Trump. That's what you do.
You do?
Yeah, well, he wants to cut your taxes.
Oh, he wants to cut taxes.
Your taxes.
My taxes got raised enormously, as you know, under the last Trump administration.
I don't know if he wants to cut your president.
No. I'm in a blue state.
Oh, yeah, no, forget you're out.
They want to kill
out.
us.
I tried to I tried to go to.
They want to put us out of business.
Pennsylvania.
That's what they want to do to us.
I can become an
they
Italian citizen
by getting rid of the salt tax deduction.
So, Robby, what do you make of that?
Well, look, Kamala is part of the current administration, an administration that is hugely unpopular, massively unpopular, not just because Joe Biden is so old and seemingly so out of it and in cognitive decline, but also let's not forget that the policies have been unpopular and people are very dissatisfied with the Biden and Harris handling of a number of issues, first and foremost the economy and inflation. And now we had this bad economic news yesterday. We're very hopeful that things will not escalate into a recession, but all of the bad economic news is bad news for Harris and good news for Trump because Trump's running against what the current administration has done, and Harris has to own what the shape of the economy is. And people feel like it's not working for them. They remember how things were under Trump prior to COVID very fondly, that things were good. Those times they want to get back to. President Biden promised when he was running a return to normalcy, but that ended up being a return to, the situation, the landscape we have now. And the Trump plan, the Republican plan to right the economy, yes, is less less taxing and less spending. Now, whether we're going to actually ever get less taxing, less spending, we certainly never seem to get less spending. I would like us to get less taxing and spending, and that will stimulate economic growth and end up being good for everyone. I guess the Harris plan, we'll have to hear more about it. The Harris-Walz plan to deal with the reality of these policies that the American people do not like and do not want. But Trump and his campaign are going to be tagging Kamala with what is going on, and if things get even worse, if this does escalate into some kind of recession, that could be the death knell for her campaign because she is, the closest thing to an incumbent in this race.
So Donald Trump appointed the current chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. Jerome Powell, at the beginning of the pandemic, saw the inflation that was happening, which was largely concentrated to the supply side. It was a lot of companies where their employees couldn't show up to work. They had to adjust social distancing. People got sick. They couldn't be there. We weren't as easily able to get products, which are inputs for a lot of businesses from other countries. There were all sorts of reasons for why companies raised prices. Many of them were on the supply side because they incurred additional input costs or saw some projection of revenue losses. Now, Donald Trump's chairman of the Federal Reserve decided to raise interest rates. Why? Because the Fed's explicit plan wanted to make 2 million more people unemployed in the United States. They wanted to raise interest rates so there would be less capital that people could access to invest in businesses and start new ones. Because the interest rate makes the loan payments more expensive, less people are likely to take out loans in a high interest rate environment. So this slows economic growth, which will also slow job growth. That is what we've seen in July. A lot of investors pay very close attention to these jobs reports. And in July, we really saw much lower growth than people were projecting. And this is an indicator to the Fed that their policy is working of raising interest rates to increase unemployment. And so now they're projecting that interest rates are going to go probably back down, and we're going to see this rate hike reversed or rates cut. And so what does that mean? Well, banks are one of the main investors in our economy. Banks are the people who benefit the most when interest rates are high because they're giving the loans to people and earning way more off of that interest paid back than they are in a low interest rate environment. Banks really like when interest rates are high for this reason. They're raking in the dollars. However, if banks are not getting that high interest rate payment anymore, if rates are cut, they have less capital. They're less likely to invest their deposits of money into the stock market, which is what banks do with the money they hold. They invest it, they turn it into more money. So maybe the economy is a little bit bad for investors right now, and they have some future projections that are not so good. But that's tied to policies that started under Trump and from Trump's chairman of the Federal Reserve. And if you care about your paycheck, you might not like Donald Trump. If you're a Wall Street investor or if you're the head of a corporation, Trump's your guy. He's going to cut corporate taxes, but he has tax cuts ending. for the middle class and the working class. And the middle and working class had their taxes cut by a lower margin under Trump than he cut for the wealthy elites. So I just don't think that's an honest argument. And calling it the Kamala crash is to ignore all of the context in our economy.
Yeah, Trump should vow to cut middle-class taxes as well. He should cut everybody's taxes. I mean, it's not over who's getting taxed, right? The Democrats want to just keep tax or get taxes even higher on the wealthy, and Republicans want to cut taxes on the wealthy, and they should be talking about cutting taxes for everyone. But the purchasing power of what working people earn money and then what they're able to buy with that money is not going to be helped, in my view, by raising a heavier tax burden on top earners or on corporations, because that does not devolve toward the products that corporations produce being more affordable or less expensive. It also will cause them to lay people off and cause job growth to slow. So I don't think that's the answer, although I absolutely agree that there should be more of a focus on reducing everybody's tax burden and creating an economy where investors want to invest in firms and in business ideas and stimulate and grow the economy and then hire people and build things. And that's what we want to get going. I think it mostly requires leaving the economy well enough alone and not putting thumbs on scales and not having some massive flow of government cash to wreck what the dollar's worth and all of those sorts of things. So, Trump has made his promises to top business people to kind of get them in line with his policies, that he's going to have keep their taxes low, and so they're enthusiastic about him. And if that doesn't seem fair to other people, he should absolutely. There should be pressure. I support pressure on Republicans to reduce everybody's tax burden, especially at the middle income and lower levels as well. I would like to see more pressure on Republicans and Democrats to do that for certain.
Yeah, I think because we're in a position where the top 1% of the country holds more wealth than all of America's middle class, people favor taxes on the wealthy because we've seen them raise prices and cut wages in an economy that's more productive than ever before, where profit margins are higher than ever before. The elites in the country are making a lot of money off of the backs of working people. And I think that's why it's not just Democrats. It's 69% of the country that supports a tax on billionaires and a tax on Americans earning over $400,000, which is what they consider to be very wealthy. You can live extremely comfortably off of that money. And I think that it makes a lot of sense to equalize the playing field and stop these people from hoarding wealth while other people can barely afford to pay their bills, but are working over 40 hours a week, sometimes 2 jobs. And so equalizing that playing field is very popular, definitely not just a Democratic issue. And when we look at the stock market, a lot of people should look at that and say, do you want the Republican proposal of having your Social Security being entirely dependent on the stock market? Or do you want what you pay in through your life working in the United States to come back to you? I don't think people want to see their retirement invested entirely in the private sector. I think they want the government to guarantee those dollars that they pay and make it back to them. So I think a lot of people will see this instability and will think critically about the economy. I don't think the Kamala crash framing makes sense when she's the vice president right now. I think people understand the economy is a little bit more complicated than whoever the nominee is the reason that the economy is not doing well.
We'll have more Rising right after this. Kamala Harris has decided not to pick Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro as her running mate. He had been in the mix since Harris entered the race 2 weeks ago. Shapiro boasts high popularity in the key battleground state, but his more conservative views in support of Israel and its campaign in Gaza was a certain point of contention among progressives who do not want the effort to continue to support Israel. The 51-year-old Jewish governor got pushback recently on an unearthed Philadelphia Inquirer op-ed he penned decades ago when he said there will never be peace in the Middle East. Here is Shapiro addressing that at an event at the University of Pennsylvania a few days ago. Let's watch.
I have said for years, long before October 7th, that I favor a two-state solution. Israelis and Palestinians living peacefully side by side. It is my hope that we can see a day where peace will reign in the Middle East, where there will be a two-state solution, where all leaders involved in the conversations will respect the other side and show a willingness to make the hard choices to find peace. And I hope that the U.S. government will always be a partner in peace and trying to find a path forward.
Shapiro faced scrutiny a few months ago when campus pro-Gaza protests erupted. He called for encampments to be dismantled, drawing more criticism. Check out this CNN interview that he did in the spring. Let's listen.
I think what's important is that we can't allow peaceful protest about a disagreement on policy happening in the Middle East to be an excuse for anti-Semitism or Islamophobia on these campuses. What I see from afar at some universities, including Columbia, is a situation that is completely out of control. And it's incumbent upon the university leadership to get it under control quickly.
In the months since, he's pivoted, focused almost entirely on potential rival J.D. Vance. Let's watch.
I'll say this about J.D. Vance. It is real hard being honest with the American people when you're not being honest with yourself. J.D. Vance is a total phony baloney. He is the most inorganic candidate I think I have ever seen on the national stage. He doesn't know what he believes, and that is why it is impossible for him to articulate a coherent message to the American people, because he doesn't believe it.
Was this pick a mistake? Statistician Nate Silver has not shied away from saying that he does think so. He posted on X on August 3rd that she should pick Shapiro, and he's written subsequently that that was the strongest choice. Conservatives certainly think Shapiro got passed over precisely because of his Jewishness being offensive to the far left. That's what they think. Newsweek's Josh Hammer wrote on X, Kamala passed on Josh Shapiro out of fear of the Democratic Party's Hamas-Hezbollah wing. Democrat elites are terrified of the keffiyeh-clad radicals in Dearborn. That says everything you need to know about Kamala and the modern Democratic Party. Republican former New York gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin said similarly, it's amazing that despite America's right, left, and center all agreeing, Josh Shapiro was Harris's best pick for VP. At the end of the day, Shapiro being Jewish disqualified him. It says so much about the state of today's Democratic Party. Now, on the other side of the aisle, progressive commentator Mark Lamont Hill has taken the opposite view, writing on X, this is a very winnable election for Kamala Harris, but it would not have been had she chosen Shapiro. Too many recently energized voters would have been deflated again. I'm so glad her team saw that. I'm even more glad that people stood up and spoke out rather than accepting. So it is the case that everybody seems excited about this pick for opposite reasons. Left-leaning people are, like yourself, are excited because you appreciate his record and his ideology and think he'll be a really strong addition to the ticket. And as we've covered previously, conservatives think they have a better case to make of Walz being very progressive, and they're going to, be making the argument that Shapiro was passed over because of his identity, because there's something discomforting about Jewish identity to this iteration of the modern Democratic Party, or the Democratic Party is humoring left-wing pro-Gaza radical people.
Yeah, I think that, this attack line that Shapiro wasn't picked because of his identity is funny when they were mad very recently that Kamala might have been picked because of her identity. Also, his Jewishness, obviously not the reason. Again, Kamala Harris's husband is Jewish. He didn't have as much experience as Walz, who's been a governor for longer and who's served in public office in a way where he was writing and delivering on policy, which I think a lot of people want to see. Kamala Harris has the background of being an AG. Tim Walz brings a bit of a different expertise, having been in the House, than Shapiro could have. But he's still campaigning. He's doing a rally today in Pennsylvania. He's very likely going to be in the administration in some way. He very obviously wants Kamala Harris to win. He's not attacking J.D. Vance because he thought he would be VP. He's attacking J.D. Vance because he has a different political position than J.D. Vance, and he wants the Democrats to win. Also because he might be in the cabinet. I think it makes sense that someone with more experience, someone who is more popular in the country, is the VP pick. It almost seems obvious, and it's very striking to me that a lot of the Republicans that are upset about it are the Republicans that were already handedly, going for Trump. And the fact that those people wanted Shapiro on the ticket tells me a lot about who actually should be on the ticket as VP. But I got a reply this morning to one of my tweets about, Walz being the pick. And he's a Republican. His name is Trey. He said, let's go. As a Republican, I'm so excited for this. Governor Walz was my first choice. And because he won in a district that's 60% Republican, 35% Democrat, I think he's someone that a lot of these never Trump Republicans are really going to take to.
That remains to be seen. I'm not so sure, but we'll obviously be hearing more from him in the coming weeks. I certainly hope there's a debate, and I expect J.D. Vance is willing to do a debate, and Walz is as well, on some of these issues, on their backgrounds, on everything of that nature. It'll be interesting to see. I also hope the Kamala Harris Donald Trump debate ends up happening. That's a little bit in doubt at the moment. Jessica, do you think young people on the Democratic side are really excited about this pick? And, is there going to be a lot of a flood of annoying to me, but really enjoyable to you and your people on your side, kind of social media content about him forthcoming?
Yeah, I think, a lot of people saw Shapiro as someone who's not a good pick because of what he said about young people who are protesting on college campuses. When people are really in the anti-war movement, protesting for peace, not wanting to live in a country where the majority of public spending time and again is going to defense. And I think they saw Shapiro as someone who didn't represent the ideals of the youths in a way that Tim Walz does. And so I think I'm so glad that people made their opinion known on Walz, that he became such a popular figure through his media hits, through people reposting his videos. He's someone who posts on social media a lot, and people want that transparency with leaders now, especially young people who are not always watching the cable news hits. They like that they can see him and get to know him on social media. So yeah, I think it's going to inject a lot of energy into the campaign, but having Shapiro campaign around Pennsylvania to make sure Kamala wins in PA is going to be huge. I'm glad to see that he's doing that, but Walz is really our guy in ensuring the youth vote continues to turn out in increasingly high numbers. I really do think, even though he's got white hair, he is the guy to do it.
We shall see. Stay tuned for more Rising right after this.
With Brent Summer going so well for VP Kamala Harris, it looks like former President Trump is working to catch up with the Gen Z vote. Take a look at this recent viral video where Trump is dancing with internet celebrity streamer Adin Ross.
I'll tell you about TikTok. Trump is going to keep TikTok going, whereas Biden, Harris, they have no idea what it means. And all it's going to do is be good for China the other way. It's no good. We're going to save TikTok. They want to destroy TikTok. So all of the people on TikTok, vote for Trump.
Vote for Trump.
By the way, Trump's stance on TikTok is quite the reversal from back in 2020 when he was considering banning the app.
Charlemagne the God said Trump's collab with streamer Adin Ross was a great move. Let's watch.
Let the record show I loved this press hit for Donald Trump, and the reason I loved it is because you have to meet people where they are. Like, you running for president of the United States of America, there is a new potential voter turning 18 every day. Right. So don't take any audience for granted. Okay, like, you got some elitist, bougie liberals who will say things like, that audience doesn't vote. How you know? Right? How do we know appearances like that don't motivate people to vote? Because when I look at Adin Ross with his MAGA hat on and the audience that he had sitting in there with their MAGA hats on and Trump paraphernalia,
they got some type of influence.
That's right, and they look like they're voting to me.
So, do you know Adin Ross, or is this the first time, Robby?
I was going to ask you the same thing. I'm the right-wing expert, but you're the TikTok expert, but neither of us know this figure. I do think, I agree with Charlemagne the God, that Trump is very savvy to go after this demographic. I also think it's smart. I mean, I think the policy is correct, and it's good politics to portray himself as the pro-TikTok force, even though Trump, was very much against TikTok and tried to ban it when he was in the presidency. He has flip-flopped on that, but it's better, from my perspective, it's better to flip-flop in the correct direction than the incorrect direction. And he's right that massive action against TikTok at the federal level would actually just empower the other. Again, it's a little bit going to the Google discussion we were having earlier, would just be a godsend to Facebook and the other companies. And that whatever the problems are with TikTok, I think there are problems. I certainly think there's censorship that occurs on the platform. I am wary of the Chinese government's influence, but I'm also wary of the U.S. government's censorship and influence on Facebook and Twitter and Google and all the things under our jurisdiction. So there's really no difference there. This would be a move to give people one less source of information if it goes through. And, it's a policy that now Biden and Harris have to own because they're in support of it. And Trump is going the other way.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would want to know how Trump would get that done, given that the TikTok ban passed through Congress. I don't know what his plan is to reinstate TikTok if it's not resold to someone other than ByteDance. How is he going to bring TikTok back? He doesn't really have a plan for that. But Adin Ross, he's not a TikToker. He's a Twitch streamer, and he is known as the guy. This is how I first heard of him. When Andrew Tate was arrested, it was because Adin Ross, who is in this very red-pilled incel online community, men who say weird stuff about women. He's 5'7", by the way, but he's the guy who said Andrew Tate is leaving Romania. That is what tipped off authorities that led to the arrest of Andrew Tate. So this is someone who's in a community of people that are typically very right-wing, and I don't know that Adin Ross's following is changed at all by Trump's appearance, because Adin Ross's following is seen as very weird and different from the rest of the youth. I would assume these are already the people that, when we poll for who they support, are the few youth voters that are on the right handedly. So I just don't see this changing things. Trump is right to not discount the youth vote and make sure the few people that like him will show up. But I just don't think Adin Ross's stream is the place to get popularity. I think as a young person, seeing him cozy up to Adin Ross and get all these gifts from him, a Cybertruck and a Rolex, really rubs me the wrong way. It's a little bit yucky. Adin Ross isn't like a popular figure.
I know literally nothing about this person, so I'll take your word for it. I've never heard of him, and I don't know where he produces content or what the kind of content is. He's probably never heard of me, so no harm, no foul. It's fine. Being pals with Andrew Tate is not, I don't think, a good idea. I don't think he's having a good influence on the young right, but it's fine for Trump to, speak to people who are his supporters, and there is a lot of energy on the young right now, a very enthusiastic demographic for Trump. The online right always has been, which skews, in a younger person direction, was kind of captured by the Vivek Ramaswamy, very much, I think, a candidate of younger conservatives who are very involved in internet spaces and dialogues, and, keeping those people energized, much like the progressive left activists who are going to do the door knocking and everything, the energy for the Harris campaign. Younger online right people are going to be doing, we're going to roll our eyes at this, but the meme wars, they matter for setting the media conversation, for generating enthusiasm online. The internet, Twitter is not real life, but it has some impact on top decision makers. It helps manifest vibes on behalf of a candidate. So I think it's interesting that, that Donald Trump is he's the candidate to defend or to protect TikTok, to protect it from the government trying to unilaterally ban it or force a sale and have it be banned if that sale does not go through. In terms of the practical matter he achieves that, I guess he could try to undo it via executive order. I don't know if that would be constitutional. He could ask his, Republicans tend to do literally whatever he wants. He could get the Republicans to undo that bill, or he could also probably just instruct his Justice Department not to bring charges against bite dance if they don't sell the company, or not to do whatever the executive implementation of the law is that causes them to incur the penalty. Just instruct his people not to do that. Again, I don't know that is legal either, but you asked what could he do, and I think those are probably the options.
Yeah, I think in part, living in a post-Chevron world, there's a lot to be said for Congress's decision on TikTok being upheld by the Supreme Court. I don't think overturning this with an executive order would hold up. I also am not super confident Trump would actually try and do that once he's in office. I don't see him winning at this point in time, and I don't think going on Adin Ross's stream has changed that. If he was on TikTok like Kamala Harris is, and people were clipping him up, and there was this organic movement of youth Trump supporters, I would say maybe the youth vote could end up, turning out for Trump and influencing the election in some way. He just doesn't have the riz necessary to win the youth voters. Him with that phone out saying, "Hello, TikTok, we're going to ban TikTok," is very much giving hello, fellow kids. So I think Trump would be smart to keep his commitments to the youth about policy. A lot of young people care about the economy because we're inheriting one that seems a lot worse than the one our parents did. And so he would be smart to talk about that and not just say, "Oh, you guys are kids, you must love TikTok," when Adin Ross is a Twitch streamer, not a TikToker. So there's just many things that Trump just misses the beat with youth voters. He's got to hire some young people in his campaign if he wants to change that, but I think it's a little bit too late.
That does it for us today on Rising. It was great delivering you all the news of the Tim Walz pick. Jessica, you've still been outside D.C. and you'll be back here tomorrow? Is that the plan?
Yes, I will be in person in studio tomorrow. The American Airlines has agreed to fly me, thankfully. Thanks, Pete Buttigieg, for cracking down on the airlines. I at least get to make it there at some point.
Thank you, Mayor Pete. We need you back in the studio. We can't wait to have you back. All right, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Same rising time, same rising place. See you then.
Bye, y'all.